Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Mark from General Catalyst. I think you guys all know Eric from Ramp as well, and we're very appreciative of you coming today. Thank you. I guess there's no big sign in the back that says applause or whatever, so it'll be all organic and authentic, but I appreciate you guys. Thank you. Thank you.
Like a laugh track in here.
Exactly. So, Eric, we're going to run through a bunch of questions, obviously focus on AI, how AI has impacted Ramp and Fintech. But for anyone who might not be familiar with it, can you start off by telling us what is Ramp and what you do for your customers?
Yeah, 100%. And even before that, first, just want to say just thank you to the team at Stripe and everyone here who's putting on this event, gathered everyone, and frankly, also to even made what we're doing at Ramp possible. So thrilled to be here and just want to say thank you for all the effort that went into organizing. So thank you. Next, Ramp. We are trying to build what we believe is we want it to be the ultimate platform for finance teams. We focus, and what we're known for is for delivering what is the fastest growing corporate card in the US, fastest growing bill payment network, and every product that we build is designed with the intent of helping our customers spend less money and spend less time. We've saved our customers over $600 million in the less than 4.5 years that we've existed as a company. And over 8.5 million hours of manual work. And so really we're trying to design an organization instead of software payment rails that are focused on helping companies be more efficient, build better businesses. And the motivation of this, a lot of this came from our background. We had started a company focused on helping consumers save before we were acquired by Capital One, one of the largest banks and credit cards in the US. And the longer that I had spent at getting to know the credit card industry, the more I just deeply felt it wasn't totally aligned with customers. A lot of people were thinking really hard and were fantastic at getting customers to spend more money than maybe they intended to. Customers, I believe, aren't looking really for cash back or points. They're frankly looking for more in their bank account, more time in the day. And we wanted to build a company that was focused on exactly that. It's happy to go deeper, but in many ways, we're much more of a workflow company. We're much more thinking about how do you actually make organizations more efficient, spend less money and time.
Very cool. Yeah, I was lucky enough to be an early investor in Ramp, and obviously General Catalyst is in Ramp as well and in Stripe, so that's very exciting. I remember asking you, how has AI changed your business in the last year? And you kind of shot me down and said, well, we've been using AI for 4 years since you started. So I'm kind of curious, maybe you can explain that a little bit to the audience. Like, where were you using AI at the beginning, the first couple years? How's that maybe changed in this last year? Has it really exploded as well? Maybe take us through that narrative.
Yeah. It's certainly accelerated a lot over the past year for sure with the advent of large language models getting commercialized. But I think going back to our fundamental premise is how do we give our customers leverage, and we're constantly thinking how can we apply technologies to make us more efficient. One of the first workflows when we're following that mission of helping customers spend less money and time is customers need receipts for the IRS. It's required for transactions over $75. Very painful for people to have to go have a George Costanza wallet full of receipts, have things around, match it to the right transactions. And it was a perfect use case where we had the structured data coming through from the network. We authorized the transaction. It's much easier to match an image versus blank slate, read it, figure out what it is to match it. And even back in 2019, pre-launch, one of our first products, which is simple receipt matching, was leveraging machine learning. Over the years, there's a lot of classic use cases, even where you saw advancements in today from the Stripe team around underwriting, fraud risk detection, using large signals of we're trying to go and understand our own activities and applying machine learning to make that simpler. But I think really over the past in a big way over the past 6 months, but certainly even over the last 9, it was creeping and accelerating, is looking at ways where you can productize this deeply into workflows. And so, even we made a large announcement around this in May, but just yesterday we scaled price intelligence to all of our customers. that can give you the insight and the benefit of tens of billions of dollars per year of purchases, of knowing, are you getting a great rate from your SaaS vendor, or are you getting charged more? Or are you getting charged less? Accounting intelligence. There are several ways one could say this Facebook transaction should be accounted for in my general ledger, but it's not rocket science. There's surely a right way, and you can learn from those patterns. And so starting to really take really large data sets and being able to leverage it into not AI-based accounting, but just automated accounting. Not price intelligence, but alerts when there's better rates available to actually save has suddenly been possible. So lots of productized use cases, and lots of internal use cases as well, which we can talk about.
So walk me through that. A year and a half ago, why couldn't you have done this price intelligence product? And, what changed where you can do it today?
Totally. First, I maybe we tried to say just large language models, but, when it's highly structured data, I think a lot of classic machine learning techniques certainly could have worked. But if you want to take, one shot, like a 30-page contract, and deliver it, ultimately upload it and say, is this a good rate? Are these terms standard or non-standard? At least in a broadly commercialized manner, there was no, I think the accuracy was quite dubious, and the level of building you would need to deliver in order to say, is this a good or a bad rate, would be immense, and very, very hacky. I think with the advent in early commercialization and scaling of large language models, you could take 30 pages of text, upload it, a minute later really truly have in a structured way, and you can ask questions, like even something that has been making the rounds in an enormous way around Ramp over the past week, is part of our commitment to try to improve the way we sell, the way we support customers. We record calls, we learn from it, we try to pull insights out of it. So we have a huge database of actually what customers are telling us that they want. What's changed suddenly is you can ingest en masse what's actually going to start learning from and asking questions and saying, what are customers asking for? What are they interested in? And how do we actually become better product thinkers and learning and not building whatever it is that we come up with, but really having at scale insights from our customers. Functionally taking that, completely unstructured data and structuring it would have been very, very challenging. And it turns out that can be something that's done with certainly very skilled engineers, but done in days to weeks, not years.
And we've certainly seen, OpenAI and ChatGPT has got like a 5 on biology and history, but maybe not done as well on math. Where have some of the limitations be where, you've said, oh, we really want this product, but the AI is just not there yet, or the tech's not there yet? What's kind of cutting edge? Where is it falling short? Where in your product would you like AI to do more?
Well, there's a lot. I'm sure everyone in this audience is playing with these models, using it in various applications. And there's a lot of things that are very surprising as you're actually endeavoring to build with it. So I think everyone here's probably experiences. If you're more encouraging in your prompt, you can get a very different output. If you're saying hey, can you get, is this a good price or not? You get one level of prompt of versus you are the best contract analyst there ever was. You're really thoughtful, you're spending time in it, and you're checking your answers twice. Now go do this task. You'll get a very different level of quality. And in some sense, that seems very bizarre. But in others, all right, this is taking language-based context. And so even thinking about how you're structuring and writing the prompts, or I think people are still wrestling and grappling with what does it mean to be coding in this manner, where really the training base is language, and the way you prompt and encourage in some sense can affect the quality of the output. I think it's just been interesting for folks to be learning and wrestling with that. I think that the other thing that for me is interesting, a lot of these large language models are generally on vast bases of text and literature in various languages. I think for us, when you think about double entry accounting, numbers, there are our own systems of rules and languages, and I think some of the large models trained on these specific types of use cases, I believe, will very quickly emerge. But in the meanwhile, You can use it, and a lot of these are surprisingly good, but I think that there are going to be vastly better iterations that are fit to specific, sub languages that aren't just, along the order of languages people speak, but the languages that professionals use in various capacities. I think there's a lot that can get done, but I think that's going to improve a lot quickly.
And how much of this are you doing in-house at Ramp versus leveraging models that are already out there? And maybe you could speak a bit to which companies or tech you found really impressive for other founders here who might be thinking who to partner with or what tech to leverage.
I mean, I think that the pace of improvement is so quick. There are real use cases where you want to be using internal models, but I think it's a very challenging time to be like implicitly betting against the mega models. Like the amount of resources being invested by these companies is so vast that I think positioning your own architecture to benefit and let the world, machine learning improvement, benefit what you were doing is first. So I think in general, being open and frankly learning and multiplexing and measuring the quality of a response, latency, speed, cost, all of it, looking and comparing. I think, OpenAI is certainly at the forefront in many ways, but I think Anthropic has been phenomenal, to see, to even, I think what Facebook is doing and, more specific models are just fascinating. And so being open, having an architecture, if you can, that implicitly is testing and is in some sense can see where it's better, is worthwhile. Because at the end of the day, for anyone building products, your mission, I believe, is to serve your customers. And, I think in some sense, if you have poor architectural and infrastructure choices, they will feel it. But if you're making great choices at the end of the day, like I believe our customers actually care about, are they more successful? Are they spending less? Are they more profitable? Not which particular model did one use. So that's I think the first piece. I think that the second kind of base way we think about it is there's when you're using the mega models, you can certainly do, in context learning where effectively you're not, sending data back to the model for learning and think about privacy. But in any workflow company or any kind of SaaS-based tool, you're going to have your own set of data. And so thinking about where you get the benefit of the workflows that you're creating for customers, the problems you're solving, your own data sets, and leveraging the learnings of large language models to take general context, general understanding, and apply it into your own workflows, data sets.
Gotcha. So you use multiple providers at the end of the day for a lot of the AI technology that you've embedded?
Certainly, at least in some level of testing.
That makes a lot of sense. To ask you a little bit about this AI tech, would you see it as something more that grows your revenue or cuts your costs? So specifically, is it an opportunity to help with customer support and reduce your cost function? Or do you see it more as a new revenue stream? People use the products more, you make more money. Which of the two does it fall under more?
I mean, I think so much of what's happening is so profound, and the capabilities are so vastly improved over the year ago. I think it hasn't fully been answered. I think in many ways, I think it's a multiplier on people. When you think about it would be nice. I don't have the time to watch 50,000 customer calls. They try to be on as many as they can, but there's a level of super intelligence that you can achieve of learning from the broad base of calls. And I think it lends itself to products that we simply could not create before. Like price intelligence is extraordinary. I think accounting intelligence, if you can be benefiting from the wisdom of what the market is seeing in the proper way to do, even if you're a junior accountant, you have really kind of the most involved of learning is benefiting you, is exciting. And I think it creates and it expands the ability for our customers to be productive, to be strategic, to be not spending time on tracking down receipts and tagging individual transactions, but instead thinking strategically about how do they improve the facets of their own businesses. So I think that's really profound. And I think it creates a lot of certainly not just customer benefit, but revenue opportunity in a real way. I think I think there are going to be those use cases on cost reduction as well. Even in terms of document parsing and ingesting, you could go to services that are using lots of regular expressions to go into it, maintaining it, or you suddenly have an extraordinary large language model that can do the job much better and cheaper. And so you have those opportunities as well. But I think of it really as a multiplier on people and create new models. I think there are interesting questions that are to come out of it. Like I think a lot of folks who are working on SaaS companies price on your gating on like you have users in a seat and they're doing work and you're charging. And you have to think about like over years, like what happens, when suddenly you have machines that are doing knowledge worker-based work or augmenting or amplifying, and you quite simply don't need so many people in the same task. I think you make them more productive. I think, in my broad sense, is like if you have a salesperson who's suddenly 100% more productive, you're like, I want more of those. Like, and you try to hire a lot more instead of cutting is my take. But like, I think even the way that businesses think about their overarching strategy is going to change a lot. And I think thinking about how do you deliver measurable, quantifiable value is going to get even more important.
And you're a two-time founder of both companies in fintech. As you think about for new founders, how can they leverage AI? There's a pretty strong argument that the leaders are folks like Microsoft, OpenAI, they're folks like Google. Even if you look at Adobe or Zapier, we heard from earlier, the incumbents are moving really, really quickly to leverage AI. What kind of opportunity is left for founders? What criteria should they use when they think about starting a company? And maybe especially talk about that if they're interested in starting a fintech company, since we're here at the Stripe Forum.
Yeah. I mean, so first, just fintech, broadly speaking, like I think it's a really fascinating time, right? Like I've said this before in some context, but I think that our actual competitors, most of their founders, not a joke, quite literally, like they wore top hats, like they lived in the 1800s. They're around like a very long time ago. And unless you were a large bank, truly until very recently, you could not move money. You had to be a bank. And if you were a software provider, you think it's like the world went from like no phones to flip phones to iPhones to virtual reality. Like a credit card basically stayed the same. The payment terminal, Stripe is a different case, but for others who are not Stripe, it's kind of the same, right? Is what it always was. And I think the door kind of blew open. In many ways, great regulations coming out of the financial crisis, Dodd-Frank, creating a whole set of infrastructure and providers where you can quite literally, you don't need to have tens of thousands of people, billions of dollars in order to, create your own bank and buy that, but you can actually, out of an apartment, create a useful set of software, issue a credit card, and be on your way to building great products. And that is such a profound difference in terms of the costs of doing it and just the ability and accessibility for folks to start businesses that I think it's an amazing time in fintech. I also think too, when you think about the premise of it, I think that software was historically very adjacent to money movement. And I think that great software companies that also move money are finally possible and really coming to the forefront. Most money too is moved through, old ways, checks, cash, very simple ways. And I think we're still very early into digitization. So broadly speaking, yeah, I think there's a ton of opportunity all over broadly in moving money. Next, when I think about, the question you had asked, does this benefit the incumbents or individual businesses more or startups? I actually think, look, if you're competing on infrastructure, maybe there's a few folks in the audience or in the world who can compete in that way and have fundamentally better algorithms. I think that's very hard. But look, I think the ability to be sincere, to notice problems in the world, understand and be thinking about where can we be applying really disruptive technologies to new spaces, I think is still as large as it's ever been. And if you can digitally call brilliant, functionally knowledge workers through an API call in order to apply to operational workflows is interesting. And I think many software businesses could create software that assisted people. And I think if AI continues to improve, you might be able to do operational tasks. And I think that's a very interesting framework change for businesses that can digitally do work on behalf of whether it's consumers, businesses. Paribus, my last company when we started back in 2015, it was very funny. It was basically trying to save customers money on online purchases. It was an early Gmail app. The idea is you link your email, we'd scan your inbox for receipts. We would check prices on what you bought, and if a store guaranteed you, it would basically if you bought something a week later, it dropped in price, you could get the difference. And we built. It was early NLP, right? At peak, we were indexing more than 100 million emails per day. We would try to go and read it. It was more regex than truly great learning, but it was kind of early hacky versions of that. We would send notes, construct them and read the responses. That was incredibly hard. Now it's basically trivial to go and do that. And when you think about the purpose of the business was, by the way, if we save you money, we would charge a percentage. It was an agency-based model. And I think it was an early prototype of it. I think agency-based business models are now much more possible and feasible to do work on people's behalf. I think there's a lot of fields too, that are large structured data sets. I think accounting is a language. It is a standard. You can create a lot more efficiency in that world for folks. And so there's different verticals, there's different style of businesses that I think are more possible and used to. And frankly, I think among early stage startups and for companies, look, not everything works inherently. This is a very challenging thing. I think it's never been more exciting. And I think the ability to augment people's potential has never been higher. So I'm very fired up.
And you talked a bit about Paribus and Ramp. Has your CEO and leadership style, was that really different between your first company and your second company? How have you sort of evolved as a CEO?
Still learning, still trying to figure stuff out. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, so the first company was very different. We raised in total about $2 million, which was more money than we could fathom at some point. But it was not, it was very much scarcity mindset. We were freaked out that we were going to run out of money. My co-founder is from Beirut, Lebanon. He's on a visa, and it was real stakes to this stuff. And I think the first time around was watch every penny, everything, and don't spend it unless and I think there's a lot of goodness. You actually avoid a lot of mistakes. You learn in real ways what the job actually is. I think it's easy to critique to say, oh, we just need to hire this person, or if only we spent on ads, we'd be growing faster. And I think it taught very hard prioritizations and internalizing. And I think ultimately a lot of our approach to leadership is do the work, be sincere, actually care and be involved with it. I think that never goes out of style. I think with the next go around, the thing that we reflected on a lot was all a company is a collection of people. There are some people you hire that multiply I think the company's ability to succeed and to create extraordinary products. And so the second time around, we were we wanted to be thoughtful about money, but it was much more an abundance of there are extraordinary people. And if we're able to create, in many ways, Stripe was an inspiration for this, where I think there were such extraordinary people who came to Stripe that it became in some ways self-fulfilling. People wanted to come to Stripe because there was an extraordinary quality of folks. There was a question of how do we create that intentionally early on in building company, not just in extraordinary engineering, extraordinary design, fantastic sales, and be thinking about that early and create a place where people wanted to come and be a destination. And so I spent a lot more time really on recruiting, spending time with the team, diving into products deeply. I think that's been an evolution, but try not to bump our head too often, but we do.
And we were kind of both part of this. I started a company with Jennifer called Tagomi, which we ended up selling to Coinbase. And obviously that started growing a lot afterwards as well. And so we were both part of Fintech and crypto were very much the hype cycle just a couple of years ago. Now it very much feels like maybe that's a fair case to make about AI as well, the size of the rounds, the valuations, pre-product. Are there any learnings from sort of the 2021 era and Fintech crypto that maybe you would give advice to AI founders, whether it's, raise at a reasonable valuation for the next round or take less money at first and prove it out? Or, are there some kinds of learnings from that cycle that you've gone through it, you've been one of the great survivors, keep growing, what kind of advice would you give to maybe some of the AI folks who are going through some of that cycle themselves right now?
I mean, I think first and foremost, businesses take a lot of years, like a lot of years, in order to really do and achieve what you set out to do. And when an investor invests and joins your company, like in some ways, like it's longer, and like then like serious relation that you can't really break up. Like you're on it, you're hitched together for like a long time. And I think it's both thinking about, first, do you want to work together? And I think spending time and actually investing, building a relationship is important. But I think more than that, I think it's very easy when you're like very hot to get just like lose perspective on stuff that like it might be like an extraordinary time right now, but in 3 months or 6 months or something that's cool off, you have the rest of your life ahead of you. And I think some of the things that really helped Ramp, as much as we grew, was like we never took the highest price. We asked for advice and thought about how do we solve problems together versus trying to raise funds directly. And the right people showed up, people who were like really interested in the problem space with you, responded to emails, or you'd say, I'm thinking about this, and they'd come back like, it's like a very VC question, ask, how can I be helpful? And occasionally some were. Like they actually, like customer interactions, they thought about different questions, and I think you figure out who do I actually want to work with, and last by like not over raising, it's exciting for people. I think people are human. They want to know, like, I could have been charged 20-30% more, but founder raised less, took it more simple. And I actually feel like now, like my investment is already worth 20% more than what it could have been, like, and people talk about it and it's exciting. And I think it's good, not just for that, but like the actual optimization is not the price of any specific round, but it's long-term enterprise value. And I think in some ways, by being more reasonable over time, it's a better partnership with investors. It's a better value proposition for employees too. And I think it structurally allows you to look, if you knock it out of the park, great. You've built more valuable businesses you can raise up. If it goes a little sideways or not quite exactly what you want to do, you've built in some room. And I think that actually does help over the years.
Oh, from the audience? Oh, okay. Sure. Yeah. If anyone has questions, we'll take one or two. All right. I guess straight back to me. I'll give you one final question, and then if anyone in the audience thinks of one in the meantime, we'll go to you. Both you and Kareem, the two co-founders, very technical product people, but I'm always surprised to see Ramp all over my Twitter feed and billboards in New York and huge partnerships. So maybe talk to us about, if you have a technical product team, how did you guys get really good at go-to-market? Was it hiring the right people? Was it doing it early? Was it spending more? Like, what do you learn there that maybe you could impart on folks who are starting out, have excellent products, excellent technical chops, and would love to have the same sort of branding and distribution Ramp has got?
I mean, it's been I think we're still very much learning. Like, I don't know. I think about, frankly, like the launch Shopify had yesterday. I thought like that was an amazing learning moment where it was a really simple production. It was CEO, it was a camera and a demo, and he was telling you about his snowboard shop and how he wanted to leverage. In some ways, he was leveraging an item to make the product better, but it was actually just a person trying to make their business better. There are great lessons to learn all the way throughout. And I think a lot of what helped us was, I don't know, I think we're a little bit curious about like people and curious about like what makes really great marketing and stories people want to write about. And I think a lot of people's first impulse in marketing is like, I have a message, I have a story, and I need people to know about it so they like buy our product, is like very natural. And a lot of books are written that way and everything. And I think it's just internalizing, like, people don't care about your product, nothing personal. Like, it's not like that. Like, people are very busy. They have their own lives. They have their own stresses, their own things they're thinking about. And I think rather than thinking about how do I describe my company and market it, it's how do I be interesting? Like, how do I create things that people want to talk about? And I think part of, even right now, some of the most popular things that people talk about at Ramp, it's not just how we've saved them, but how we recognize different companies, how we're highlighting different businesses. how people who are a part of the story want to cheer the company on. And I think the starting place of that is really thinking from the customer first. I think that's part of what made the video yesterday from Shopify great. But I also think, just being curious and spending time reading about the companies you really admire and trying to figure out why, that helps.
No, that makes a ton of sense. I was early at Airbnb and they said the same thing. A lot of the marketing was how do we get the hosts and guests to talk about being hosts and guests. So that certainly resonates. Well, unless we have any other questions. Oh, one question right here.
Definitely known for its like breadth and depth of products, especially like the product velocity. I'm just kind of curious, like how do you guys think about balancing them, like exploiting versus more at nano sort of concept?
Super good question. I think in general, there's an intentionality around our mission statement of we want to maximize the amount of money and time that we're saving our customers. It's not we want to like win the credit card market or have the largest bill payment provider. Like, I'm not in the business of like selling products. Like I'm much more interested in like what is the end problem that a customer is trying to use and being generally curious about it. And if you start with that premise, customers will tell you like these are actually the problems in business, and some are really idiosyncratic and like particular to their business, but some like keep coming up. And there are certain vectors where there's a high degree of pain, and what we're doing over time can start to lend structural advantages. And if we can do that, there's deep pain. We have a unique ability to win and can build a vastly better product. We want to do that. There's areas around the fringes where we might be integrating, we might be going deeper, but really starting with the user's problem and letting that guide in a lot of ways the product strategy. And if you do that, you get much more input, not of did they buy the product or not? Do they like this thing? How do you price it? But like, what are their problems? And it becomes an engine to start discovering and thinking of how do we build it. And we're constantly like the next half of the year, like we're deeply excited about the product velocity. And like we're building things up in like months, in some cases like a year before like it's coming out to market, and it's sort of, coming back from that central prop. I think the other piece of it for velocity, no one likes it when they have to go check with like 30 people to like change the color of a button or like, get everyone's input of like, what do we call this thing? Or like different design decisions. Like, I think it's still just like great things can be done with small teams in a very compressed timeline. And remembering that as you scale is super important. Like even some of our largest teams today are like less than 10 people. We have lots of small teams with real ownership. We try to do as much as we can, to say like, what does success actually ultimately look like? And so those are some of the principles.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Eric, for coming here today and spending your time with us. I'm sure a lot of founders appreciate it. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Mark. And thanks everyone for coming today.